It seems everything is connected. Pizzagate, the Franklin scandal, and now the Epstein case. If they aren't going to give us the Epstein files, we're going to have to make the connections ourselves. Follow me down the rabbit hole about that right now. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the rabbit hole. I'm your host, Danny, and today we are talking Epstein again. I know it's like episode 4 at this point, and this episode is all about the connections. As many connections as I could find, I connected them. Some people, there isn't a lot of information about like how they know Epstein or like what the situation is there. Other people, we have a lot of information. So I'm going to try to give you as many people as I could find. I'm sure I've missed people because there's so many. Like this is such a spider web of connections. Before we start, of course, I love to thank our sponsors. So thank you, Wise Wolf Gold, for sponsoring my podcast. Guys, if you want gold and silver delivered straight to your front door for as little as $50 a month, go to rabbithole.gold right now. You can sign up for a subscription. It comes every single month. It's really cool. We're going to start at the top, where he met probably all the elites in the world, I would say. He is a very well-connected person. He was a member of the Trilateral Commission, which we talked about in the Rockefeller episode, the Council of Foreign Relations, and the New York Academy of Science. And he was also a board member of Rockefeller University. So you've got some pretty big names there. Let's break it down a little bit. The Trilateral Commission, according to its website, quote, is a global membership organization that for decades has brought together senior policymakers, business leaders, and representatives of media and academia to discuss and propose solutions to some of the world's toughest problems, end quote. The commission was founded by David Rockefeller in 1973. And if you remember from the Rockefeller episode, David Rockefeller was called the world's most evil man while he was alive. So, not a great guy. The Council of Foreign Relations mission is to inform U.S. engagement with the world. It was founded in 1921 and is described as a nonpartisan, independent national membership organization, think tank, educator, and publisher, including of foreign affairs. It generates policy relevant ideas and analysis, convenes experts and policymakers, and promotes informed public decisions, all to have impact on the most consequential issues facing the US and the world. Which makes me wonder, like, why was Epstein a member of both of these? He is not a policymaker. He is not like an expert of really anything. I mean, maybe finances you could argue, but there's not that much evidence to even prove that he was an expert in finances. Like, yes, people said, I'm paying him to give me advice on my taxes. We didn't ever actually see him doing any of his taxes. So the Trilateral Commission, I kind of get because it says business leaders. Like maybe you could consider him a business leader, but why the Council of Foreign Relations? Unless he was put there by the people he was working for. I'm thinking Mossad, but it could have been the CIA or someone else as well. Like it could have been anybody that put him in this position to be in those meetings all the time. But also, maybe they wanted him there because the elites of the world were there. They were like, you need to be in these meetings to meet these people. You need to rub shoulders with these people. A couple things I found interesting when going through the connections, and I kind of broke them up into like sections. The amount of magicians Epstein had in his orbit. I thought this was really weird. It's actually my first section just because I thought it was like a very odd thing. When we're talking about Epstein, we're talking about this guy that committed suicide, right? So he's probably still alive, I think is the general consensus at this point that he wasn't murdered and he didn't commit suicide. He's still alive. He had a lot of magicians around him. Some of them like the best magicians in the world, I would say. So Alan Greenberg, we've talked about this guy so many times. So he's the CEO of Bear Stearns. He hired Epstein to work there from 1996 to 1981, while the CEO at Bear Stearns, Richard Kaufman, an author, illustrator, publisher, and editor of magic books, approached Greenberg to purchase a publishing company to publish magic books. So Richard Kaufman had been publishing books, had been editing books, had been writing magic books for years. Finally, he was like, I want to create my own publishing company. I need money. Alan Greenberg was a member of the Society of American Magicians. He's like, this guy has money and he's a magician. So let's hit him up. And it was a perfect fit. He was a good choice because he was also a well-respected amateur magician. perfect fit for this position, right? In the mid 90s, the company changed from Kaufman and Greenberg to Kaufman and Company. I'm not sure if that's because Greenberg left the company, but I'm assuming that's probably the situation. The company is still around and printing magic books today. Greenberg, like I said, was also a member of the Society of American Magicians, the oldest and most prestigious magic organization. This society was founded in 1902 in Martinka's famous magic shop in New York City, although they are now based out of Denver, Colorado. And one more thing about Alan Greenberg that might be important, his son went to Harvard. Did Alan's connections to Epstein get his son into Harvard? Or maybe Alan has those same connections to Harvard. I don't know. There's just so many connections to Harvard that I just bring it up every chance I get. The next person that was like an illusionist, Al Sickle. He was a collector and popularizer of visual and sensory illusions. In fact, he was called the illusionist. Like that was the name that most people knew him by in LA. He moved to LA in 1981 and became known for his parties. These parties weren't like regular Hollywood parties. They weren't freak offs like Diddy was doing. They weren't like a bunch of people getting drunk. They always centered around something. Sometimes it was magic or some illusion, but sometimes there were specific instructions with the invite. Like bring the most interesting person you've ever met, or bring a copy of the book you've most enjoyed. And because he was a collector of illusions, he would have different illusions and like art around his house. So some of these parties were like, we are just going to study this one illusion and we're going to figure out everything about it. And there were big names at his parties, Elon Musk, for one. Many of the scientists that attended the Mindshift conference on Epstein Island would attend Al's parties, which then makes you ask, why was an illusionist putting on a science conference on Epstein Island? Because he was the co host with Epstein? Unless it wasn't a science conference at all. Especially because after Seckel moved to LA, he fell into free thought movement groups, which also John Brockman, who we talked about last week, was also a free thought movement guy. Al gave a TED Talk in 2004 about how your perception isn't always reality, and I think that that fits with Epstein. We are focused here on him, but what are we not seeing below the surface? Who are we not looking at while we're looking at Epstein? What is the like smoke and mirrors situation about Epstein? Because there's something, and I know every like all the research I'm doing, I'm like there's something that I'm just not getting. I just don't know what it is yet. In 2007, Al and Isabel Maxwell, sister to Ghislaine Maxwell, got married. The pair moved to France in 2010 to care for her mother, and Seckel was found dead at the bottom of a cliff in 2015. Which I thought about putting that in the mysterious deaths category because I have one of those categories as well, but I felt like illusionist made more sense for him. Another famous magician around Epstein was David Copperfield. He is the most successful magician in history. He is known for making the Statue of Liberty vanish and reappear, levitating over the Grand Canyon, and walking through the Great Wall of China. Most of those things I'm pretty sure you can find on YouTube. Kaufman, remember from Kaufman and Greenberg, published one of David Copperfield's books for him because he published magic books. He was named in a deposition as part of a case against Epstein in 2010. Sarah Kellen, an employee of Epstein's, was questioned specifically about him. They asked, do you know that when David Copperfield is in town, he gives Jeffrey Epstein tickets, and Jeffrey gives some to young women to attend those shows? Do you know that those girls are invited backstage after the show? Which points to a relationship between, obviously, David Copperfield and Jeffrey Epstein. Sarah, in this situation, invoked the Fifth Amendment and was like, I'm not going to incriminate myself. I'm out. One of Epstein's victims, Johanna Schoberg, also pointed to Copperfield being at Epstein's house. She didn't say specifically if she had sex with him. She doesn't actually say if she had sex with many of these people on this list. At some point, like with Prince Andrew, she said that he groped her, but she kind of wasn't ever sexually assaulted from the testimony that we have. Whether that's true or not, maybe she was just like trying to protect herself. I don't know. And I'm not trying to victim shame at all. But I'm just saying that she said that she saw David Copperfield at Epstein's house. David Blaine is another one who has been around Epstein. He put on a private show for Epstein's dinner guests in 2003. He was doing card tricks for the group. At this dinner, which was put on by Ghislaine Maxwell. A group of young women were there. They were introduced as Victoria's Secret models. It's not clear whether they were or not. But we have a bunch of prominent figures we're going to get into. Both Bill and Hillary Clinton have been verified to be associated with Epstein. If you don't know who the Clintons are, let me enlighten you. You've been living under a rock for I don't know how many years. But Bill Clinton was the Attorney General of Arkansas, then the Governor of Arkansas before becoming the President of the United States from 1993 to 2001. And Hillary Clinton, Bill's wife, who was also a lawyer because Bill was a lawyer, she was the attorney for the House Judiciary Committee during the impeachment inquiry against President Nixon after Watergate. She was also the U.S. Senator for New York before becoming the Secretary of State for Obama, and she has run for president twice. She's lost both times. Bill Clinton officially visited Epstein 26 times. Officially. Unofficially, it could have been like hundreds of times. Most of the time, it was without Secret Service. But there were times that Secret Service would come and they would just tell them to wait outside. He was also placed on the private jet many times, at least 11 times, if not more. They tried to spin this to be humanitarian trips to Africa in the early 2000s, and they did take a trip to Africa in the early 2000s. Kevin Spacey, Chris Tucker were on that flight, along with Ron Burkle and Gail Smith, but there were 10 other flights that are unaccounted for. You didn't go to Africa for humanitarian issues 11 times, especially because the manifest doesn't say that. It says you went to Africa once, but he kind of flew Clinton all over the world. Clinton has also been called out by the victims who stated that Bill Clinton, quote, likes them young. On another flight, Bill flew with model Naomi Campbell. And on yet another flight, he was accompanied by a young actress who worked in the porn industry, but she was not named. Epstein reportedly raised funds for the Clinton Foundation. Leslie Wexner was one of the donors to the campaign and the foundation. And Bill Clinton pointed to his trips abroad as charity trips for his foundation. And he even said that he was accompanied on these trips by supporters of his foundation. That could have been Leslie Wexner. That could have been any number of really rich people on the plane. Like, hey, donate to my foundation so it looks like everything's on the up and up, right? Like, that's easy. They all have millions of dollars. Clinton has threatened Vanity Fair to not write anything bad about his good friend Jeffrey Epstein. Like, he's definitely used his power to like really change the tides for Jeffrey Epstein. These guys, I think that anytime we talk about Epstein, Bill Clinton's brought up. He's probably the number one person they just throw under the bus. But I think Clinton already had a bad reputation, so it's easy to just like throw him to the wolves and be like, "Yep, it was Bill Clinton." Everyone's like, "Oh, of course it was Bill Clinton." And then they just kind of forget about everything else. I think the same thing with Prince Andrew, which we're going to get into literally right now. He's eighth in line for the British throne. If you don't know who Prince Andrew is, he was a friend to Epstein and a companion to Ghislaine. They can't get remarried after they get divorced. He got divorced unless his wife is dead. He can't get remarried. Anyway, I think that it's easy to just, it's like throw them a bone, throw them somebody. Like Prince Andrew is eighth in line for the throne. It's not like he's going to get to the throne unless a bunch of people get killed all at the same time. Now he's going to be on the throne. Like it just doesn't make a lot of sense. So let's just go ahead and throw him away. Right? Bill Clinton, he's never going to, like, yes, he's got his foundation. He's never going to be that big again. Hillary might, not Bill. Let's go ahead and throw him out. And now even Hillary, like she hasn't been elected twice. Will she run again? Probably not. Anyway, back to Prince Andrew. He was accused by Virginia Giuffre and Johanna Schoberg as well. While Virginia claimed that she had been molested by Prince Andrew, Johanna claimed that she had only been groped by him while sitting on the couch at Epstein's mansion in Manhattan. Virginia's accounts of him were more in depth and detailed. She said she knew he was a member of the royal family, but she just called him Andy and was told by Epstein to give him whatever he wanted. So she had sex with him at least 3 times. One of those included an orgy. And then she was paid $15,000 after they had sex. Which again, they're forcing these girls to be prostitutes. Like, oh, here's some money. Thanks for having sex. Which makes them like look worse than they actually are. They were literally trafficked and then raped, and then you paid them to make yourself feel better. Get over yourselves. Intelligence agencies had reasons to keep the royal family out of the sexual scandal. So then why did Prince Andrew get caught up in all of it? Like he had connections to elite power players, which made him a liability, but also useful leverage for intelligence operations tied to Epstein's blackmail ring. However, due to his connection to Epstein, he has stepped back from his royal duties. I don't know if he was like stripped from his royal duties or he was like, hey, you should take a step back. If you don't, we'll strip you, but like we want it to be your idea in the public. We're going to save face. It's like the only thing we can do right now is for you to make this decision to take a step back. And that's what he did. Either way, he didn't have a lot going on before, and he has even less going on now, which means that he has a lot more time for things that he shouldn't be doing. I don't know what he's doing now. I mean, once a dog, always a dog, I guess. In 2022, he settled a lawsuit with Giuffre over the sexual assault claims. And according to the flight logs in 1989, just 2 years after their divorce, Epstein met with Prince Andrew's ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, and their kids when the plane landed. My question was, why was this on the flight log? Like, I don't even understand why on the flight log it said we flew. I didn't see the whole thing. I just like kind of zoomed in so I could read the handwriting because it was really bad handwriting. Like, we flew to Britain and then I met with Sarah Ferguson and kids on the ground, is what it said. Met with Sarah Ferguson and kids on the ground. Why would you put that in there? Like, they're not getting on the flight unless he was literally just trying to keep a log of every single person he met with. He had a little black book for that too, though. So I don't understand why the flight log. Anyway, doesn't matter. It makes me wonder, like, is the flight log credible? I mean, I'm gonna share with you what I found on the flight logs anyway, but I do have some questions about like if it even matters. Prince Andrew was a frequent visitor of Epstein's Paris home, along with his island and his Manhattan home. They were friends. But let's move on to our current president, Donald Trump, because this seems to be like the biggest thing right now. He has been pictured with Epstein on so many occasions, which has been pointed to for at least him being friends with Epstein, right? If nothing else, they were friends. Johanna Schoberg said that one time on Epstein's private jet, they couldn't fly into New York for whatever reason. I have to assume probably weather. So they decided to stop in New Jersey, specifically Atlantic City. And Epstein was like, oh, perfect. I'll call my good friend Trump. And that's kind of like a situation that happened. We don't know what happened after that. Obviously, they were friends. It just kind of points to a connection. Trump was also one of the many people that sent cards for Epstein's 50th birthday book. So Ghislaine was putting together this book. A bunch of people, I think like 50 people, sent in cards. So she had to handpick 50 of his best friends, and he knew a lot of people to send cards for his 50th birthday. She put it all into a book and handed it to him for his birthday. So obviously, Trump was one of those people. Clinton, Bill Clinton, Leon Black, Vera Wang, Mortimer Zuckerman, Les Wexner, Alan Dershowitz, Jean-Luc Brunel, which we're going to get into him in the next episode because I did not have time this week, and Nathan Myhrvold also sent birthday cards for this 50th birthday celebration. Many of the cards were sexual in nature and made references to the crimes they were committing, although most people looking at it would be like, oh, ha ha ha. So, like, Nathan Myhrvold sent pictures from his Africa trip that he had just taken of a monkey screaming, lions and zebras mating, and a zebra with its penis out. And he said, quote, they seemed more appropriate than anything I could put in words. Which I think points to everyone knowing what Epstein was doing and just nobody caring because they're all involved as well. Nathan eventually came out and he was like, oh my gosh, I often send him pictures. I'm a photographer. I enjoy taking pictures as a hobby. So I send him nature pictures. You're like, these are very specific nature pictures that seem to have to do with sex. And we know that Jeffrey Epstein's a sexual predator. So, I think you knew he was a sexual predator as well. But of course, Trump's involvement with Epstein is what everyone is pointing to as to why they won't release the list. Although I think it's a lot deeper than that. I don't think it's just Trump stopping this. I think that if I had to take a gander, it goes higher than Trump. But Trump does keep saying that Epstein scandal is a Democratic hoax that actually implicated Democrats, all the while he won't release the files, which he's a Republican. Later on, we get into Sarah Kellen. She actually was the employee of Epstein and donated to Jeb Bush's campaign. So I don't think it's like the Democrats versus the Republicans. I think they want to fuel that fire. That's not the case here. This is definitely a bipartisan issue if we have to label it as a political issue. Officially, Epstein and Trump were going after the same property in Palm Beach, and Trump won out and they lost touch after that in like 2004. Although, according to Epstein's butler from his Paris home, Trump offered Epstein a position during his first administration and Epstein turned it down. So, I think that they were still friends after that. I think that it's easy for Trump to be like, nope, see, you can look back at the public records and see that we were going after the same property. We weren't friends after that anymore. Well, oops, sorry, we fell out of touch. They love passing the blame anyway. So let's get into Barack Obama. Many people that were associated with Obama or worked with him while he was in office were also associated with Epstein. In the recording she left before she died, Virginia Giuffre pointed to Obama as taking a liking to the island boys. She said that he wasn't there for the girls. He was there for the island boys, which kind of like backs up our Big Mike theory. So if you haven't listened to the Michelle Obama episode, go listen to that. But this definitely backs that up. She said that he would show up without Secret Service, which Bill Clinton did the exact same thing, and I'm sure Donald Trump does the same thing too. And he was often there with his good friends George Clooney and Tom Hanks, which we already know Tom Hanks is a freaking shady ass guy. If we ever had a shady guy, it's Tom Hanks. It doesn't help that Obama was recently on a video call with a piece of pottery kind of like behind him, and it had triangle spirals on it. This is a known symbol of boy lover. And actually, in a picture of Ghislaine and Donald Trump together, she's wearing this like shawl type thing that has these triangles that are like spirals, which again, boy lover. So I don't know. We could point to Pizzagate in this situation. We could point to Jeffrey Epstein. Either way, Obama's pretty shady. But officially, he's never been to the island and he has no ties to Jeffrey Epstein. But he keeps hiring people that do have ties to Jeffrey Epstein. And he's really good friends with Bill Clinton. So just thought I'd throw that out there. But let's get into Bill Gates. He's the co-founder of Microsoft and a philanthropist. He was married for 27 years to Melinda Gates, and he literally got divorced because she didn't like how close he was to Epstein. She decided, like, nope. He was also unfaithful to her, which has led to the divorce. But this was one of the big things in the coffin where she was like, "You are too close to this guy. I don't like him." And then later it was like, "Yeah, he's a pedophile." Bill's meetings with Epstein happened after the 2008 conviction, so he knew exactly who Epstein was. He had meetings documented from 2011 through 2013, often taking place in Epstein's Manhattan mansion. In the recording, released after the death of Virginia Giuffre, she pointed to Gates for doing experiments on people on Epstein's island. If I had to put money on it, I would say that he also did experiments at Epstein's ranch in New Mexico, but I can't say that for sure because I don't have any evidence to that. She said they called him the benefactor and they would dread to see him naked, which means that he was also having sex with the girls. Like he wasn't just conducting experiments, he was having sex with the girls. He was mostly there for the experiments, though, like genetic and human experiments. She said she saw him inject a young girl with something they said was a genetic enhancement, and that they often talked about seeing the future of the species, which we know that Elon Musk is trying to do that. We know that Jeffrey Epstein was into that. So why can't Bill Gates just like jump on board and they can all be buddy buddy? But speaking of Elon Musk, who is currently fighting with Bill Gates, I think the two of them are like publicly feuding, which I think is always an act. I don't think that's ever like a real thing. And he's also the current wealthiest man on earth and the creator of SpaceX and Tesla. During a time when Musk was struggling to get funds for a project he was working on, probably a company that he was launching, he was pictured with Ghislaine. Not long after that, he tweeted, quote, "Funding secured," end quote. He is adamant that he did not get the funds from Epstein, but Epstein had a lot of powerful friends and a lot of money. So yes, he might not have gotten the money directly from Jeffrey Epstein, but there's a number of people Epstein could have connected him with, like Leon Black, to get him the money. Let's talk about Leon Black. He's the co-founder of Apollo Global and later became an executive at BlackRock. Black did attend Harvard Business School to get his MBA. It was exposed by Senator Ron Wyden in a letter detailing Black's financial relationship with Epstein that Black paid Epstein $158 million between the years of 2012 and 2017 for consulting services, whatever that's supposed to mean. He paid an additional $20 million for a trust transaction that saved him $600 million in future tax liabilities. Leon Black was paying Epstein a lot of money. Besides Les Wexner, he was the other billionaire that paid Epstein the most money. So those two funded Epstein's life, basically. After it was revealed that he and Epstein spent so much time together, that he had paid Epstein so much, again, I don't know if he was asked or if he did it because he wanted to, but he stepped down as Apollo Global Management CEO and chairman. Allegations have since come out against Black, claiming that he raped a 16-year-old girl with autism and a rare form of Down syndrome at Epstein's mansion in 2022. And that's not the only accusation. Russian model Gazelle Ganeva claimed in a series of tweets that she was sexually harassed and abused by Black for years before he forced her to sign an NDA, which she did under duress. Black introduced Gazelle to Epstein and tried to force her to have sex with him, but she did not. And her lawsuit against Black was just dismissed. So, of course, no legal action is going to be taken against Leon Black here. He was also accused of sexual misconduct by one other victim, but that victim withdrew her lawsuit and her name is nowhere to be found. I'm trying to respect her privacy. Black, who is worth $13 billion, has not been charged with any crimes. The likelihood is that he will not be charged with any crimes. $13 billion. This guy has so much money. Ehud Barak, the Israeli prime minister from 1999 to 2001, studied physics and math at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and had a 35-year military career in the Israeli Defense Forces, eventually becoming their equivalent to the commander-in-chief. In our country, commander-in-chief is the same as the president. In other countries, it is not. He visited Epstein's home in New York and Florida about 30 times between 2013 and 2017. But in some of the pictures of him going into Epstein's mansion in New York, he is completely covering his face like he didn't want to be seen. He didn't want anybody to know it was him. Barack has been on Epstein's plane and has visited the island a number of times as well. Makes me wonder, actually, if he was Epstein's handler. I don't have any evidence to support that. But if Epstein's that high up in Mossad, then this guy, who was like the highest up in their military, kind of makes a lot of sense. But again, I have no evidence to support that, just speculating. Michael Baden is an American physician and forensic pathologist. He is the only one that did the autopsy on JFK, MLK, Ronald Goldman, and Nicole Brown Simpson, O.J. Simpson's not victims because he was let off, Phil Spector, Jeffrey Epstein, and George Floyd. This is the doctor that concluded that JFK was shot from behind and supported the single shooter theory. For MLK, he upheld that James Earl Ray was likely the lone shooter. For O.J. Simpson, he suggested murders occurred later than prosecution claimed, questioning wound patterns leading him to get off. In Phil Spector's death, he argued the victim may have committed suicide. In Jeffrey Epstein's death, he disputed official suicide ruling and said injuries were consistent with homicidal strangulation. And most recently, in George Floyd's death, he concluded the death was due to asphyxia from sustained neck and back compression. In Epstein's autopsy, he was hired by Mark Epstein to do the autopsy. So Mark had already decided that Jeffrey Epstein had not killed himself. He decided that he had been killed. It seems like this guy, Michael Baden, this doctor, this pathologist who does all these autopsies, he is paid off. So whichever side pays him the money to do the autopsy, he gives them the theory that they want to hear. So in this case, with Jeffrey Epstein, when he did the autopsy, he ruled that it had to be homicidal strangulation. What they don't show is if it's actually Epstein in there at all. To me, this lends more credibility to Epstein still being alive, probably. Nikki Haskell, who was a stockbroker turned media personality and is best known for hosting the Nikki Haskell Show, was best friends with Ivana Trump, Donald Trump's ex-wife. And she actually dated Epstein in the 1980s. She said he didn't talk much about his past, but that he was a concert pianist and that he was a spy hired by corporations to find major amounts of money which had been embezzled. I didn't know he was a pianist at all. Yes, he was like hired to find money that was embezzled. Was he a spy? I mean, he enjoyed telling people that. I think that he probably was actually a spy, and then the rest of it was an exaggeration. Either way, that's all she knew. The idea that Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein hardly knew each other is just bananas to me, especially because you're telling me that Nikki Haskell and Ivana Trump are best friends. Ivana and Donald Trump were married at the time. Nikki and Jeffrey Epstein are in a relationship. Seems like a pretty serious relationship. These are best friends. They're definitely going to have their significant others around each other. And Epstein would want to be around Trump due to his connections. Like the guy was very popular in the 80s. He was doing all these big things. He was like this real estate guy that was trying to like really make it in the business. This is like right up Jeffrey Epstein's alley. And if nothing else, he can get some blackmail on the guy for his handler. Darren Indyke was Epstein's personal attorney. He was reportedly among his closest associates and advisors. If anyone knew anything about Epstein, it's this guy. He was also a co-executor of Epstein's estate with his personal accountant, who we'll talk about next. Indyke was sued by two women, along with Epstein's former accountant, Richard Kahn, claiming that they had administered a network of dozens of bank accounts, corporate entities, and money transfers that enabled Epstein's crimes, which honestly is probably true. Interestingly, though, Palator Law Group, who was defending Trump in between his presidential terms with all the crazy stuff that was going on with him, hired Indyke in October of 2022 to help on Trump's case. He was hired for his expertise on the legal side of the Epstein business. Whatever that's supposed to mean. Richard Kahn was Jeffrey Epstein's accountant for 14 years. He also served as a co-executor of Epstein's estate. He knew probably just as much as Darren Indyke because he ran the money. And if we know anything about anything, follow the money. Boris Nikolic, who is a Harvard-trained immunologist and biotech entrepreneur, and has also served as the chief scientific advisor to Bill Gates and his foundation, was named as the backup executor to Epstein's will if the primary co-executors could not perform their duties. Apparently, Boris has come out and said that he didn't even know Epstein. Like, they didn't have a relationship at all. He has no idea why he would be the backup executor. He only had ties to Epstein because they were both clients at JP Morgan Chase's private bank. That's the only tie between the two. It makes no sense to him, and he would not do the job had he had to step up to be the executor. That's what he says publicly. But Epstein wouldn't just choose anyone for this job. Like, he had to choose the perfect people for this job. Somebody that he had a really close connection with. Because if he is still alive, this person would have to be able to move the money so he could get access to it. You're telling me this random guy, Boris Nikolic, who's just some immunologist, a Bill Gates advisor, random guy. Jeffrey's like, yep, this is the guy. I don't know, throw some names in a hat and pick one out. This guy seems good. That does not make any sense. Like, they had to have some kind of relationship, and probably a pretty close relationship. But especially because in 2011, a book by virologist Nathan Wolfe thanked both Epstein and Nikolic in the beginning of the book for their contributions. But their only tie is their private bank. And he has no idea who this guy is. Never met him before. Jeffrey Epstein, never heard of him. Woody Allen, a filmmaker, actor, and comedian who has been in the industry for 8 decades, was Jeffrey Epstein's neighbor in New York. Allen has been accused of abusing his adoptive child in 1992, and it was concluded that he did not sexually abuse her, that it was just like grossly inappropriate. But that just makes me like, the whole story is basically like the babysitter walked in on him with his head between her legs when she was like 6 or 7. Do with that what you will. Super, super creepy. And it wasn't just these allegations that made Woody Allen a pedophile. He carried on a relationship with Christina Engelhardt, who was only 16 years old when they met. And she was trying to be a model. She approached him allegedly, and she actually wondered if she was the inspiration for his 1979 movie Manhattan, which was about a 40-year-old man who dated a high school student. She claims she had sex with him more than 100 times, sometimes even with the mother of his children, Mia Farrow. Christina Engelhart went on to be Epstein's personal assistant in the 1980s. Epstein also allegedly gave Woody Allen money to finance one of his movies. Which one? I don't know, but he was the money man for at least one movie. Larry Summers, who was the president of Harvard University. Prior to that, he was the Treasury Secretary for Bill Clinton. And after he was the president of Harvard, he was the director of the National Economic Council for Barack Obama. See, the ties go back to Obama. He just keeps trying to keep his name clean, which is not working for him, obviously. He and his wife have flown on the Lolita Express according to the flight logs. Even after he had registered as a sex offender, Summers' wife, Elisa New, who was an English professor at Harvard, accepted a $110,000 donation from Epstein to her PBS poetry show. She was like, money's money. Alan Dershowitz, who we have talked about in several episodes, was a law professor at Harvard and was on Epstein's legal team in 2007 for that whole shit show where he got like a slap on the wrist barely. He said many times publicly that they were only acquaintances. Yet the flight logs from the Lolita Express have him flying with Epstein since as early as 1997. He was named by Virginia Giuffre as one of her molesters, and he claims he only flew on the plane one time to go to Les Wexner's 60th birthday party, but according to the logs, he flew several times and with several different girls. In the logs, these girls were named by just like one name, like just their first name, so like Tatiana or Claire or Hazel. They never had a last name, and there were several times actually that they didn't even name the girls that were on the plane. There was just like two females. That was it. One of the times with Bill Clinton, it said like Bill Clinton and 10 secret security guys. And you're like, okay, fine. Every now and then he would bring his security detail, but not all the time. Marvin Minsky, who we talked about in the last episode, was an American cognitive and computer scientist, mainly studying in artificial intelligence. He co-founded the MIT AI laboratory. Virginia Giuffre was directed by Epstein to have sex with him while he was on the island for one of the conferences. And Nathan Myhrvold, which we talked about a little bit earlier, completed his fellowship at the University of Cambridge working under Stephen Hawking, which we already know he is connected to Jeffrey Epstein. And Nathan was the former CTO at Microsoft, and we know that Bill Gates and Jeffrey Epstein are like besties. So, of course, and Nathan sent a card for his 50th birthday, but again, only 50 people sent it. So Nathan must have been pretty high up there on the list if he's going to be allowed the opportunity to send a birthday card for his 50th birthday. I found this website that has a bunch of people that were named in the Black Book that was released years ago now. But again, they're still not releasing the whole list. But this is the people outside of the people I already gave you, like more detailed information. I'm going to give you the people off this website. This is nymag.com. Intelligencer is the name of the article, or maybe the name of the section. And it names all these people. So it starts with Woody Allen. We already talked about him. Charles Althorp, who was Princess Diana's brother. Dr. Eva Anderson Dubin, which we did talk about her. She's a doctor and former Miss Sweden. She's Epstein's ex-girlfriend, and her husband, billionaire hedge funder Glenn Dubin, had Epstein over for Thanksgiving dinner in 2009, telling his probation officer they were 100% comfortable with him being around their teenage daughter. Weird. She also created a foundation so Epstein could donate to her breast cancer charity without attaching his name. So the Dubins are horrified by the new allegations against Jeffrey Epstein, they said in a statement. Had they been aware of the vile and unspeakable conduct described in these new allegations, they would have cut off all ties and certainly never had allowed him around their children. Guys, you knew exactly what he was doing. She was Miss Sweden, right? But she's a doctor. So she was like, all he's ever given me is money for breast cancer. And I don't even know the guy. Turns out they dated. Of course, Prince Andrew, we talked about him. Vittorio Assoff, who's a restaurateur, who started the Upper East Side institution Serafina, which we've talked about with Pizzagate restaurant owners. They know people. They know a lot of people. I mean, people come into restaurants all the time. Doug Band is an influence peddler, a one-time White House intern who climbed his way to being Bill Clinton's bag carrier, body man, fixer, and all-purpose gatekeeper. Wonder what he had to do for that. Band arranged for the former president to travel to Africa on Epstein's 727 in 2002. Band would go on to help his boss found the Clinton Global Initiative in 2005, a choice platform from which he launched his own lucrative favor trading corporate advisory firm, Teneo. Throughout that time, he took a number of trips on Epstein's plane and attended parties at his townhouse. Band resigned from his position at CGI in 2012. Leaked emails later showed Band and Chelsea Clinton trading accusations of conflicts of interest in a war of influence over her parents. More recently, Band's been teaching a public service class at NYU. Great. This guy should definitely be teaching people at NYU. Andre Balazs, he's a celebrity hotelier. Alec Baldwin, an actor. He denies knowing Epstein, of course, though he appears in the Black Book. But Alec Baldwin did invite Julie K. Brown, who did the Miami Herald expose, to come do a podcast with him. So that's interesting. I wonder if she'd come on my podcast. Steve Bannon, former White House chief strategist. Donald Barr, who I did not go over again in this episode. I feel like I've beaten the Barr horse to death. So Donald Barr, again, hired Jeffrey Epstein at Dalton School, and then William Barr was like besties. Anyway, they go way back. In fact, they grew up together. Tom Barrack, Trump advisor and private equity manager. Sandy Berger, national security advisor for Bill Clinton. Nicholas Bergeruin, who is a billionaire investor. Bill Berkman, New York businessman. He is actually a wealthy executor whose family established the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard. Imagine that, bring it all back to Harvard. Berkman was actually sued in 2014 by his administrative assistant, who said she was forced to read emails Berkman had sent to a colleague containing pictures of random and unsuspecting women on the street. That is creep shots. That suit was settled. Robin Burley, nightclub impresario. He owned the club where Meghan Markle and Prince Harry had their first date. Debonair von Bismarck, who is a countess. She is listed as Debbie in the Black Book. Leopold von Bismarck, who's a count. He was nicknamed Bola. Vanessa von Bismarck as well. Heiress and publishing entrepreneur. Conrad Black, a media mogul, he is perhaps known best for being sentenced to 42 months in prison for fraud, then writing a book about Trump and receiving a pardon. Vicky Ward, who profiled Epstein for Vanity Fair in 2003, said Epstein heavily leaned on Black, who is her ex-husband's uncle and was her ex-husband's then boss, to try to exert his influence on Ward. Probably to not get the Vanity Fair profile written about him. Leon Black, who we have already talked about in so many different ways. Roy Black, who was a lawyer for Epstein, but has kind of been like this celebrity lawyer. He was Justin Bieber's lawyer. He was Joe Francis's lawyer, who was the creator of Girls Gone Wild, and Rush Limbaugh's lawyer. David Blaine, the magician, we talked about him. Troy Blair, former British Prime Minister, who I think was named by Virginia Giuffre, if I'm remembering correctly. Michael Bloomberg, a billionaire, private jet enthusiast, and former mayor. Hassanal Bolkiah, Sultan of Brunei. Epstein had at least one meeting with the Sultan when he traveled to Brunei in 2002 with Bill Clinton. Bolkiah and his brother are famous for their lavish spending, including a collection of 2,500 cars and a $1.5 billion palace. He was actually sued by Miss USA in 1997, who claimed she had been held as a sex slave by him. So him and Epstein had to be really good friends, like doing the exact same thing. The suit was actually dismissed on the grounds that Bolkiah had sovereign immunity. Great. Annabelle Bond, a British socialite, probably friends with Ghislaine Maxwell. Andrea Bonomi, Italian businessman. He is the chairman and founder of Invest Industrial, was a key character in the Paradise Papers international tax shelter scandal. Michael Borico, who's a Long Island contractor. He's actually known for hosting polo matches at his estate in Watermill. Frederick Bork, the founder of Booney and Bork. Hamish Bowles, European editor at large for Vogue. What a good guy to have in your pocket. Muriel Brandolini, interior designer. Her clients have included Matt Lauer and Crown Prince and Princess of Greece. Richard Branson, the founder of Virgin Group. Like Epstein, he enjoys entertaining on a private island, but he's also got a whole airline, he's got ships, he's got all kinds of things. Flavio Briatore, who's an Italian millionaire businessman. He's a friend of Trump, a convicted card cheat, and an accused Formula One race fixer. So he's all about just being a shady kind of guy. He was actually a longtime fugitive in the Virgin Islands. John Brockman, which we talked about again earlier. Edgar Bronfman Jr., who's an executive. He's a former Warner Music Group CEO, son of the late Seagram CEO Edgar Bronfman Sr., is related to the Nexium sex cult Bronfmans, and his son has a child with pop star MIA. So this guy is very connected. Jean-Luc Brunel, who's a model scout, and we are going to talk about him next week. Joan Juliette Buck, a fashion editor. In 2003, Buck met Maxwell at a fashion party at a New York City boutique. Buck had recently moved on from her 7-year tenure as an editor of Paris Vogue and was writing for its American counterpart and living in New Mexico. She was a lifelong resident of a rare field social world. Maxwell, a regular on that particular circuit, quickly made a connection. She was like, Jeffrey has this ranch in Santa Fe, yada yada, and they kind of exchanged numbers. They hit it right off because of this New Mexico connection. Ron Burkle, a supermarket magnate. Burkle took what were described as humanitarian trips to Africa with Bill Clinton on Epstein's private jet. And according to a 2008 Vanity Fair feature about the former president, Burkle's usual means of transportation is the custom converted Boeing 757 that Clinton calls Ron Air, and that Burkle's own circle of young aides privately refer to as Air Fuck One. So, really good people. He's just surrounded by good people, and we're only in the B's because this is all in alphabetical order. Candice Bushnell, columnist who inspired Sex and the City. Arpad Boussin, a French financier. He and Uma Thurman have children together. Jason Calacanis, a businessman, the inventor of Uber. Nikki Calden, who's an earl. Naomi Campbell, supermodel. We talked about her a little bit. Nicholas and Christian Candy, British property development brothers. Graydon Carter, former editor of Vanity Fair. He actually was responsible for killing portions of the 2003 story by Vicky Ward that accused Epstein of pedophilia after an office visit from Epstein. So Epstein called in all these favors, and then he just showed up at Vanity Fair and was like, don't do that about me. Aurelia Cecile, a PR chairman and former girlfriend of Prince Andrew. Mark Cecile, hedge funder, has hosted Prince William and Kate Middleton at his villa in Mystique. Vikram Chatwal, who's a hotelier. Bill Clinton actually attended his wedding. Giuseppe Cipriani, who is a restaurant magnate. His restaurant is actually famously known for being Harvey Weinstein's hunting ground. Again, great people to be around. Gosh. Gustavo Cisneros, who's a Venezuelan billionaire. Obviously, Bill Clinton. Chelsea Clinton. Ghislaine Maxwell attended her wedding after Epstein had first been charged. This was shortly after she skipped the deposition for the Epstein case, claiming she needed to return to the UK to be with her deathly ill mother, which her mother was sick at the time. Nicholas Coleridge, chairman of Condé Nast Britain. Phil Collins, the musician. David Copperfield, the magician. Katie Couric, the journalist. She actually attended a dinner at Epstein's townhouse for Prince Andrew in 2010. Bill Cosby, of course, he's a convicted rapist and comedian. He lived across the street from Epstein in Manhattan. There was a lot of weird people on that street. We should all stay off that street. You have Jeffrey Epstein, Woody Allen, Bill Cosby all in the same street, the same block. Nope. I'm not going there. Prince Pierre Darbourg, who's obviously royal. Louis Albert de Broglie, who's a political scion, founder of luxury garden brand. Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York, of course. Sophie Dahl, former model and granddaughter of Roald Dahl. Lynn Foster de Rothschild. You know, he just flew on Epstein's jet. You know, Rothschilds. Alan Dershowitz. Janice Dickinson, who's a model, actress, TV personality. Pedro Diniz, Formula One driver. Minnie Driver, who's an actress. Stephen Dunbar Johnson, President International of the New York Times Company. Griffin Dunn, who's a director. Gerald Edelman, Nobel Prize winner. We talked about him. Eric Ellenbogen, former CEO of Marvel Enterprises. Christina Giuffrida, who's a model, and the ex-wife to the late Willard Jufali, who's a billionaire chairman of the largest privately owned enterprise in Saudi Arabia, which we know that Epstein has connections back to Saudi Arabia. Sarah Ferguson, who is Prince Andrew's ex-wife. Steve Forbes, chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes magazine. Tom Ford, who's a designer. Mark Getty, co-founder and chairman of Getty Images. Malcolm Gladwell, who's a writer. He actually rode with maybe 24 TED conference goers on Epstein's private jet to a TED conference in maybe 2000, 2001, sometime around there. Gerald Goldsmith, a Rothschild in North America. Cornelia Guest, a socialite. John Gutfriend, CEO of Salomon Brothers. George Hamilton, who's an actor, like a C-lister. Chelsea Handler, who's a comedian. She also attended the dinner at Epstein's townhouse for Prince Andrew in 2010. Nikki Haskell, we talked about her. Stephen Hawking, Stephen Hoffenberg, all these guys we've talked about. Dustin Hoffman, the actor. Elizabeth Hurley, actress. Lauren Hutton, model and actress. Walt Isaacson, former editor of Time. Mick Jagger, the musician. Andrew Jarecki, who's a filmmaker, the director of the documentaries Capturing the Friedmans, about an accused pedophile. And The Jinx, which profiled Robert Durst, the madman at the center of another New York fortune. Weird that he's connected with Jeffrey Epstein. Henry Jarecki, who's a billionaire, and Andrew's father. Elizabeth Johnson, heiress to Johnson and Johnson. Epstein was actually a co-trustee on 14 parcels of land the Johnson and Johnson heiress owned in Dutchess County, New York. He reigned as a trustee for Johnson's revocable trust at the end of 1998. That's weird. Why would she give him so much power? Richard Johnson, gossip journalist for Page Six. You want to have all these people right in your back pocket, of course. Ethel Kennedy, human rights activist, widow of Robert Kennedy. Ted Kennedy, who's a senator, lots of Kennedys. Geoffrey Kent, high-end safari entrepreneur. John Kerry, he ran for president and was the Secretary of State. Henry Kissinger, Secretary of State and National Security Advisor. He also served on the Council of Foreign Relations with Epstein. Nancy Kissinger, who's a philanthropist, her and Epstein served on the Rockefeller University board alongside Nobel laureate Joseph Goldstein, socialite Brooke Astor, and Texas billionaire Robert Bass. Leah Klellman, art dealer. Stephen Koslin, Harvard psychologist. Very into Harvard, this guy. Lawrence Cross, talked about him. Geraldine Laybourne, a TV executive, co-founder of Nickelodeon, and with her husband Kit and pal Oprah, they also founded the Oxygen Network. These guys are such good people. Simon Le Bon, who's a singer. Gerald Lefcourt, Epstein's lawyer. He had a lot of lawyers. Another attorney for Epstein was Jay Lefkowitz. He actually negotiated the terms of Epstein's negligently lenient plea deal with Alexander Acosta. Courtney Love, the singer, also Kurt Cobain's ex-wife or widow. Ghislaine Maxwell's on the list, of course. We'll talk about her next episode too. Patrick McMullen, a photographer. Robert Meester, insurance executive. George Mitchell, Senate Majority Leader. Rosa Mockton, former CEO of Tiffany & Co. in the UK. Rupert Murdoch, media mogul, and the arch nemesis of Robert Maxwell. They did not like each other. But interesting that he's hanging out with that guy. Joe Pagano, venture capitalist, chief executive, secretary, and treasurer, principal accounting officer, and principal finance officer of an insecticide research company. He also visited Epstein in jail. Andre Pastrana Arango, who's a former Colombian president. Ronald Perelman, Revlon chairman. He actually invited 14 guests to include Jimmy Buffett, Epstein, and DNC co-chair Don Fowler to his Palm Beach house for a Bill Clinton fundraiser in 1995. Steven Pinker, the linguist who became a celebrity optimist. Alberto Pinto, interior designer for the Gold Leaf Life. Bob Pittman, chairman and CEO of iHeartMedia. Felix Posen, philanthropist. Tom Pritzker, executive chairman of the Hyatt Hotels Corporation. Although I'm surprised that we're not seeing the Hiltons on here. I guess, I don't know. Carol Radiswil, author and television personality. Louis Ranieri, the father of mortgage-backed securities. And he also went to dinners at Epstein's. Bill Richardson, former New Mexico governor, who probably didn't care what Epstein was doing on his ranch. Epstein also donated $50,000 to his campaigns, so that probably helped. Steve Riggio, Barnes & Noble CEO. Joan Rivers, who we know was killed by the Obamas. Charlie Rose, television journalist. Roger Schenck, chief learning officer at Trump University. He actually visited Epstein in prison in 2008. Chuck Schumer, New York's senior senator. Maria Shriver, journalist and former First Lady of California. Rodney Slater, Secretary of Transportation under Bill Clinton. Peter Soros, nephew of George Soros. So you know those two were like hanging out together, I'm sure. Kevin Spacey, the actor. Warren Spector, Bear Stearns executive. Caroline Sandbury, who's a socialite. She also was a star on Bravo's Ladies of London. Kenneth Starr, former United States Solicitor General. George Stephanopoulos, a former White House communicators director. He also went to that dinner in 2010 for Prince Andrew at Epstein's townhouse. Larry Summers, we talked about him. Julie Taymor, who's a director, and actually is responsible for the biggest hits in Broadway history, The Lion King, but also responsible for the biggest flops, Spider-Man, Turn Off the Dark. So they've gone both ways. Robert Trivers, we talked about last week. Donald Trump, of course, we talked about him. Ivana Trump was in Epstein's Black Book. Ivanka Trump is in Epstein's Black Book. And Melania Trump. All the Trumps. Edward Tuttle, who actually renovated the island for Epstein and created like the temple thing that they have with like, I don't know, it's very Greek-esque. Linda Walkner, the head of the textile corporation behind Calvin Klein and Speedo. Mike Wallace, 60-Minute journalist. Barbara Walters, broadcast journalist and TV personality. Bob Weinstein, former chairman of Miramax Films and the Weinstein Company. Leslie Wexner, of course, we've talked about him so many times. Elie Wiesel, Nobel Prize winner. Nina and Jim Zagat, who are publishers. Mortimer Zuckerman is the last person on this list. He is a media mogul and newspaper publisher. So we have all these people that are connected. Luckily, I found that list. I found it last minute, so I didn't look into every single person on the list, but it kind of gives you this very broad look at all these people that were connected. We have one more person that's kind of connected. He's not like officially connected, but he made so many connections online that he was murdered for it. And that person is Nikolai Mushegan. He was a pioneer in cryptocurrencies from Kansas, of all places, and then he moved to Puerto Rico. He was actively participating in the development of decentralized finance. He wanted to end global banking corruption, so you already know they killed him because the Rothschilds were like, none of that. Get out of here with that. So he was living in Puerto Rico at the time, and on October 28th, 2022, at like 4 a.m. in the morning, he tweeted, quote, CIA and Mossad and pedo elite are running some kind of sex trafficking entrapment blackmail ring out of Puerto Rico and Caribbean islands. They are going to frame me with a laptop planted by my ex-girlfriend who was a spy. They will torture me to death, end quote. 4 hours later, his body was found in the water of Ashford Beach. This area was known as like a dangerous area because the currents were just too bad. This guy's just like washed up dead in an area he knows because he lives in Puerto Rico. By the way, very similar to the Obama's chef that was killed, he was found fully clothed with his wallet still in his pocket. The authorities did not consider his death a homicide, meaning they ruled it potentially either a suicide or an accident. They didn't know which one, not a homicide. Nobody killed him. It happened. Well, about a month and a half before his death, he tweeted, quote, 3 possible futures for me. 1, suicided by CIA. 2, CIA brain damage slave asset. Number 3, worst nightmare of people who fucked with me up until now. I am sure these are the only options, end quote. He actually had a lot of really odd tweets, lots of different pictures of different things, kind of like illusion pictures, kind of odd. It was just all odd. He talked about fighting the central banking cartel who used debt and blackmail as weapons. He was super against the banks. Who owns the banks? The Rothschilds. Who owns Mossad? Probably also the Rothschilds. Who owns CIA? I would say the Rothschilds. So now we have all these people. It does connect to Epstein because he is part of this pedo ring blackmail thing that they had going on, this entrapment. But did he actually kill Nikolai? I don't think so. Was Nikolai killed because he was trying to create this decentralized currency or for exposing the CIA and Mossad for blackmail? Or maybe it was both. I don't know. There are other weird deaths we're going to get into next week. We're going to get into Ghislaine Maxwell a little bit more, all the employees, because there's at least 4 ladies that got unindicted co-conspirator through that like 2007, 2008 trial with Epstein. We're going to talk about them because these are employees that were facilitating the trafficking of these girls, like bringing these girls into or paying. Remember, we talked about how some of the employees were paying the girls after they were done giving Epstein massages. These are those people. We're also going to talk about Jean-Luc Brunel, which we haven't even touched on yet because he plays an important role in this story as well. So until next week, my friends, stay skeptical and I will see you all then. Hey friends, The Rabbit Hole is an independent podcast with everything you hear done by me, Danny Mercy. I appreciate all of your support. Please rate and review wherever you're listening. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it's at rabbit.holepodcast. And thank you, Zakar Valaha, for our awesome intro.